Hello, everybody. Welcome to Conversations with Vegan Women Leaders. I'm your host, Katrina Fox, and I'm delighted to bring you our special guest today, Dr. Leila Dehghan. Now, Leila is a medical doctor turned plant-based nutritionist, and she made that, I was going to say pivot, but pivot's a very 2020 word, but she made the change to nutritionist through her own personal health challenges, which we're going to find out about in our conversation today. So Leila is the founder of Plant-Powered Chi Nutrition. She's passionate about food justice and health equity, and she's very keen to find ways to address racial and socioeconomic issues that affect health. Her project, Food and Diversity, seeks to introduce a plant-based diet to people of the global majority. And in case you don't know what that is, that's a term that's been coined to refer to Black, Indigenous and people of colour. Leila is also a member of the advisory board for the Plant-Based Health Professionals UK. This is a wonderful women-led organisation that I found out about quite recently, actually, just late last year through the VegFest UK. And I'm just so blown away by the wonderful work that they're doing. And Leila has also created a 21-day plant-based health challenge to encourage and invite more people to go plant-based. Leila, welcome to the show. I'm so excited to talk with you.
Hi, thank you for having me. I'm really excited about it as well. Thank you.
So I am curious about you, and I've got a particular reason for asking, which I'll probably share as we go along. But correct me if I'm wrong, I believe that you were born in Iran, you did your medical degree in Vienna, in Austria, and you're now based in the UK. So I'm curious, tell me a little bit about growing up in Iran. I'm not sure how long you were there. Were you there just as a child or as a young adult? Tell me a little bit about growing up in Iran and any experiences that have shaped who you are today.
Well, yes, I was born in Iran, and I guess I was quite lucky. I wasn't the firstborn, and I wasn't even the firstborn daughter. So I have a sister who's older than me. So I was like a middle kind of child, and I guess in a way that was kind of good because it meant there wasn't a lot of pressure on me to be like somebody special, do something special. There wasn't that pressure from my parents. So I think that was good. But at the same time, being a woman in Iran, and it is interesting, it's probably because of my sister. She was always like kind of a feminist, even at a very, very young child. She was very aware of like kind of, as a woman, she wanted to be more. And that wasn't, she was really just, I'm talking about like, 5-6 years old, So because of that influence, I guess, I always felt like, I want to be more too, I don't want just to be like this traditional woman and kind of, lead that kind of life. So kind of growing up in Iran, I was very small, actually. I was very little when we left Iran to come to, to move to Austria. But I was aware that, being a woman meant that I couldn't do certain things, if my cousin would play and we weren't allowed to play with them. Obviously, my sister would go and try to play with them, and I was just always watching. And I guess I never actually, because, when people tell you don't do this and you should be this person, you never find out who you are, who you want to be, because you're always just either trying to conform or to rebel against that. So for me, I think, when I was young, I was just trying, when I was very little, I was just kind of really copying my sister quite a lot, I guess, really just trying to be like her because everybody loved her. So I thought, then she's doing something right because everybody loves her. So I should be like her. I should be like her. She was really kind, helpful, and wanted to do something against injustice. So I thought, I can copy her. But at the same time, my mom is a very traditional lady. And obviously my family, everybody, I come from a traditional, background, a traditional middle-class Iranian family. So it was like kind of, as a girl, you're not supposed to do this. And you get these messages, you shouldn't run and you shouldn't do this. So, and I was very sporty. So it was like, there was this clash, like I wanted to do certain things and I got kind of the encouragement from my sister that it is okay to do that. But at the same time, these messages that, as a woman, you are not supposed to do these things. So I was always struggling, to find out who I want to be. But then, I was little. I was like about 8, 9 when we left Iran. So I don't really, although it did shape me, but, and I was kind of, I was young. So, and I wanted, I didn't really want to move to Austria. It was so different to my background. So it was like, I mean, at the time I didn't have the right word for it, but now I can say it was actually cultural shock. So I went to this country, which is completely different, a different language. And because we are from a traditional kind of background, my family was like kind of religious. I was actually brought up as a Muslim. I was actually wearing the hijab, even as a young child, I was actually covering my head and all that. So moving to Austria meant that I had to remove that. And I didn't like that. I felt like kind of, it just, I was a child. So, and I had seen my aunts, everybody, my female cousins, everybody was, doing that. So I wanted to be like them. So for me, that was actually kind of something I was really upset about, that I had to remove that. And again, because I grew up as a Muslim, I was actually a practicing Muslim, because you can be a Muslim by name, isn't it? So even in Austria, although I was very young, I was like kind of, trying to make sure that, I always wear the clothes were kind of covering my whole body, like kind of not showing anything. And I was young, you're a teenager. And then, but the culture I was in was like kind of, my classmates, I went actually to an all-girls school, which was probably good, didn't have all these kind of boys running around, and especially coming from my background. But at the same time, my classmates, they would come back on Monday to school, and they would talk about boys, their boyfriends, and how much alcohol they had. And I was like, kind of, why are they so upset with alcohol? I don't even drink alcohol. So it was really this. So I was always an outsider. And Austria is quite a racist country. In fact, I think the word Ausländer, which means foreigner, was probably the first or the second German word I learned. Because I remember, when I was like just a 9-year-old child, we were walking on the streets, and somebody, pointed to us, like kind of because we look different, and say, "Oh, Ausländers," or foreigners. So for me, my identity has always been like kind of, I'm a foreigner. And I know we talk about immigrants, but I think that's a fancy word. That wasn't my experience. Immigrant is somebody who kind of comes to a country on their own free will, and they want to do that. I didn't feel like I had a choice, and the way they treated me, growing up, even at school, I was always the one who had a different opinion about things. Like, when we were discussing politics in the history class, they would look at me and say, "So what about you?" Because I was the one who would say something completely different, and that would actually make people have a conversation about it. Yeah, go on.
Yeah. Why did you move? Why did your family move from Iran to Austria?
Well, initially, we weren't supposed to move. It was about my brother, who was older, and, there was the war between Iran and Iraq. And all the guys, all the boys, had to be drafted to go, to the war. So my parents obviously didn't want that for my brother. So they decided that they just take him out of the country. But then we went to visit him, during our holidays. It was just a normal holiday break. And it is funny, my father actually never really finished high school. And so I don't come from an educated background. And my mom just finished high school. So, for them, they actually never had the chance to go to college. But for them, I mean, my dad was a self-made man. He came from really poor background, but he worked hard to, create a business for himself and help other people. So, but for them, education was really important. And although my mom was traditional, she knew that as a woman, if you have your own job, if you have your own money, you can be a little bit independent and have a better life. So for my parents, education was really important. They always encouraged us actually to study. So we came to visit my brother in Austria, in Vienna, and my sister was young. She wasn't even a teenager at the time. My dad was like, kind of, "Do you want to stay here?" And as women, we didn't know if staying in Iran, we could actually go to university, what would happen. So it was a bit uncertain, the future. And my sister was like, "Oh yes, I want to study. I want to actually be different. I don't want to be one of those conventional, traditional women." So she said yes, but obviously she was a child. So my parents couldn't just let her, stay alone in a foreign country.
So you all had to
whole
go.
family had to move.
That's so interesting. Thank you for sharing about your background, because I think we have a kind of perception, and I'll admit, and I have too, and I have a reason. I think I put on one of your Facebook posts. So I was adopted, and I knew from a very young age that my birth father was Persian, and I grew up in Dartford, which is in Kent. You probably know, just outside of South London. So, a place that's not really terribly, certainly not back when I was, a child, is particularly racially diverse, or even, particularly friendly towards people from different races. So my adopted mother, if I did something wrong, she would say things to me like, "Oh, you're just a filthy little Arab. You should go back to where you came from." Like, kind of. So I kind of grew up with that. And then seeing the whole revolution when I was 13, I think it was 1977 on the TV, all the kind of, the fundamentalist kind of, taking over. And I thought, I don't want anyone to know that I have anything to do with that. So I would even like when I got to be like a teenager, if anyone, said to me, "Oh, I heard you're adopted, and what have you," I would say, "Oh, my birth parents are Greek or Spanish or Italian." Like, I wouldn't say. And I remember standing at a bus stop. It was a night bus. Actually, I've been to a lesbian nightclub on a Saturday night, Piccadilly Circus. I was waiting for the night bus at like 3 a.m, and this Middle Eastern guy came over to me, and I said, "You are Iranian?" And I just looked at him. I was furious. I said, "No, I'm not." And he was like, yes, I can tell." I was like, "No, I'm not." And I was like, "Oh my God." So I'd really internalized that, racism, and that whole kind of what I think of, and what I think we do often in the West think about Iran. And so that's why I thought it was interesting that you, even though your mum, like you said, was quite traditional, you were still encouraged and allowed to study, and I guess become more westernized, which is, I guess, how Iran was according to my birth family. They sort of said, "Oh, it was like the Paris of the Middle East." It's kind of interesting that you've had that. So what is your perception as you're in the UK? You obviously don't wear hijab anymore. You're posing in your sports, doing your cool stuff. How did that kind of come about? Like, was there a particular time or age where you thought, okay, I still like my culture, like I still am Iranian and feel it, but I don't need to, do the wear the hijab? Was there a point where you even thought, because some Middle Eastern women will actually think, "Oh, well, actually, I realize it's a tool of oppression, and therefore I'm not going to wear it." I'm not suggesting that. So, but what was your experience with it?
It is interesting because I had a grandma. I mean, both my grandparents, actually, my grandmothers, they were very religious and very respected in their community. And especially one of them, although she died when I was very young, but she was, as I said, very respected. And we kept hearing her name, her stories, how she used to do this charitable work and all that. So for me, religion was actually something good. I never actually thought that it is something not to own to it. I was actually happy to say I was religious, and although I struggled with certain things, like kind of, why can men marry 4 women or this and that? And I always try to actually defend Islam. And especially when you grow up in the West, and, I kind of had lost my identity as an Iranian, but I wanted to kind of, and I was this foreigner who didn't belong there. So for me, it was like kind of, I was trying to cling to something. And we had actually a religion class for Muslims there. And I remember the teacher was from Syria, and we had all these other people, from all the other countries. And for me, that was so helpful to come to somewhere where I felt like actually people are like me. So it gave me like a haven, so kind of, where I could actually go once a week, and I feel like, there are people who are more like me. So I never saw religion as a kind of tool of oppression as such, and especially covering and, not being allowed. I think that is, I never actually experienced it as that. And I think it is also because my family is traditional rather than religious, although my grandmothers were religious. So, and my mom was actually very westernized before getting married. So, and she actually encouraged us to be like kind of, wear this dress. You don't need to cover yourself all the time. You don't need to do this. So for me, it was like, but maybe because we were given that freedom. And again, my father was traditional, and but he never actually said no to us. Even we wanted, when I decided that I want to go on a trip with my classmates, he didn't say, "Oh no, I'm not going to let you go, not do that." He actually said, "Okay, I'll give you the money, go and do it." So because maybe, I don't know, they trusted us. I don't know. They gave us that freedom. And maybe because they gave us that freedom, I never felt like I wanted to do it. And for me, for a long time, I clung to Islam as my religion, because that was my identity. And also because I saw that everybody was attacking Muslims. And I was trying to say, you cannot just, I don't like to generalize and say, all Muslims are bad. And I wanted to show them, look, I'm a Muslim. I'm not like that fanatic person you imagine to be. So for a long time, I carried on actually being a Muslim, although I kind of at some point stopped practicing it. But I guess, as you grow up and you change, and I realized it is actually a man's fault. All the rules and laws we have, it was made by men for men so that they can have a better life. It was never meant for me as a woman. So, and that actually created that change, that I realized actually all religions, for me, as far as I'm concerned, all religions are by men for men. I mean, I have a few Buddhist friends, and they say like kind of, they have all these rules, like if a woman is not allowed to do this and that. And I just think, if a religion doesn't accept me as I don't even like to say equal to man, because that would make them a man, like kind of superior to me, and I want to be equal to them. We're all human beings. So if a religion doesn't give that to me, then how can I mean, I'm actually very spiritual, and I believe in a God.
Spiritual, yeah, same. You're right. I
really believe in a God, but not the male God, just a God.
Right.
So I guess, again, my parents, because they wanted us to be independent, to study, to have that. And maybe they knew we wouldn't really go out and start partying and doing these things. So maybe that made it easier for them to trust us and give us that freedom.
Yeah.
But
brilliant.
I never saw religion as a tool of oppression, but I know it can be. But at the same time, there are women who embrace it, and they do it on their free, of their own free will. And I think allowing them to do that is also very important.
Cool. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's really helpful for people to hear that, and to maybe get rid of some, misperceptions that people have. So as a young person, you also suffered from migraines, and this went on into your teens, into when you decided to study medicine. I think I read that in your 4th year of medical school, you were, majority of the time, you were bedridden and in terrible pain. How did you get through that? And just tell us a bit about what that was like for you.
When you start having like a condition as a child, we don't really understand this. So for me, it was like kind of, yes, I had all these episodes when I would get a very bad headache and I would just lie somewhere. And obviously my parents tried to kind of keep me comfortable, and they would go and buy me some toys or something, And so when I came out of that episode, they would, give that to me. So it was like kind of, I wouldn't say they spoiled me, but I never felt like that is something I'm gonna live with, with it, the rest of my life. And also because there's a family history. My dad used to have it, and my aunts. So it was like kind of, okay, people get it. I think it got into a problem when I realized actually it is taking over my life. And again, as a teenager, when I was going to school and I had these episodes, sometimes they felt like, I don't like to call it that, but it was like a relief to have this migraine, and because then I could actually get out of the class and go and visit the doctor's office in the school and have a break from my classmates. So again, it was really kind of bothering me a lot, the pain. But again, I thought it will go away on its own. I think I really noticed it is a problem when I started studying, medicine, and I was just missing out on a lot. and not just classes, but also just, going out with friends. I couldn't do certain things everybody else was doing because then I would get a migraine. And people don't understand it, because for me, migraine is not just one type of pain. There is a spectrum of pain, Is it that bad that I need to be in bed and not talk to anybody, or can I actually go for a walk? So people would see me maybe walking on the street with my mom, thinking, oh, I thought you have a headache and, you canceled on me, but here you are. And they couldn't understand that, my mom doesn't expect me to talk to her. So, I wanted to be active as much as I can, because, it is horrible, when you have migraine all the time. You don't want to be husband. So it was really bad. And but again, I think just the idea, because a lot of doctors told me there is a psychosomatic aspect to it. So I thought, if I get happier at some point, it will go away. So, and again, that was probably one of the other reasons I left Austria, because the discrimination, the racism, I was really unhappy. And I just thought, maybe if I come to a new country, and I thought England is diverse. And, I remember when I, as a student, I came to London, and everybody was talking English, and they actually assumed I'm one of them. They would ask me for directions. I'm like, wow, I never had that. In Austria, after living so many years there, I'm still treated as a foreigner. Even when I speak German, they are like kind of, I can't understand you. They still get all of that. Whereas in London, they would actually treat me as if I'm one of the locals. So I moved to England thinking that, maybe it is the psychosomatic aspect, maybe, it gets better. But obviously it didn't. And now I know that it had a lot to do with my nutrition. But it is a lifestyle. I like to call it a lifestyle disease, because it's not just nutrition. It's also how you live the rest of your life. So, yes, that was the reason I quit medicine, because obviously as a doctor, you have to be really good. You cannot just go there and... you have to study all the time. There are exams, and I just
and you're overworked as well. Like the hours that medical students and medical doctors have to do, like it's a very high stress job, isn't it? I'm just thinking, when you said you were almost bedridden for that final year, I was like, all kudos and credit to you for managing to pass all your exams, become a medical doctor. So then you made the difficult decision to leave medicine, and I know you've described it as a low point in your professional career, but how did it impact you personally, like doing all that work, all that study, and then realizing, I literally can't do this, I'm going to have to leave? What kind of emotions were you experiencing at that time?
When you're forced to do something, you just do it. You don't even think about it. And for me, it was like kind of, almost non-negotiable. I had to do it. But I think what really hit me later was that, as a doctor, I still had this status. I'm a doctor. And then suddenly I lost that status. And I was just, just like anybody else. And it is, and also I realized that all the friends I had were actually other doctors from hospital, doctors I had met. So I weren't in touch with them anymore. And so, yes, it did. I think actually I lost a lot of my confidence after quitting medicine. And it took me a long time to get it back, because I think part of me actually felt like a failure, because again, you meet people, they say, oh, they have migraines. You meet a lot of doctors who have migraines. So you just wonder, why is it that they can continue? Why is it that they can still have a life and I couldn't? So I felt like, I did something wrong. I was a failure. So it was a very low point. And my sister always says, I lost my confidence. It changed me, obviously. And going for jobs, applying for jobs and not getting them, jobs that I was overqualified for, and I would still not get them. So, it's, obviously, I had a bit of savings, but still, it didn't cover much. So it was actually a loss of status and confidence, and it took me a while to get back on my feet. And to be honest, I think I got back on my feet when I actually discovered a whole plant-based nutrition, because not only it gave me back my health and my life, but also I suddenly realized, I don't know, nutrition was so fascinating to me. It was, and it's not because I studied medicine. I suddenly actually discovered that I actually like science, because as a doctor, I wasn't interested in the science. I wanted to become a doctor to help people. So my reason was something else. The science was just a necessary aspect of it. I had to do it, but I wasn't really interested in all of that. But when I actually started learning more about nutrition, I got really interested in the science, in the molecules and all these little things, what is happening in our body. So so it was like kind of, and that was a huge kind of, change in my life, a huge kind of, shift, a very big shift, and
And it's interesting. I like that you shared, because I can definitely relate. Right, when you're forced to kind of leave something and then you lose that status, that identity. I had a situation 11, 12 years ago when I lost the job that I had. A journalist job was a dream job, and all of a sudden it's like, oh, I'm not the editor of that magazine anymore. And it's like, who am I? And it took me a good while to kind of, it's a shock to the system, and it can take a while to go through. So I appreciate you sharing that. But anyway, it was wonderful. You've kind of gotten into nutrition. You've still got the credibility of being medical doctor in your practice, which is wonderful. So you're passionate about health and food justice. Tell us a little bit about your food and diversity project.
Well, again, as I said, I went into medicine because I wanted to help people. I wasn't really interested in disease and all that. And I had this, this idea that in the developing countries, because they don't have access to good doctors, they don't have access to all the good medicines, that, I wanted to become a doctor and actually go and help them. And I even volunteered as a doctor in a rural hospital in India. And so that was always my aim, actually to go and help people who needed help because they didn't have access to good medicine. And then I guess what happened is along the way, I realized actually it is not just access to medical doctors or hospitals. It's even access to education, access to food. And obviously, as a nutritionist, I was interested in how their diet, people's diet is actually affecting their health. And the more I learned about it, the more I realized actually what they are eating, it's not just having access to healthy food, but also this colonized mindset that everything which is from the West is better. Like even the fast food, McDonald's, Burger Kings, Pizza Huts. When I went to Bangladesh and India, you see all these places, and these fast food kind of companies, this Western fast food companies, offering processed foods, unhealthy foods, and they are sought after. And actually, anybody who goes to those places, it's almost as if it gives them a higher status. So actually, people go to those places to show others that they are better than the rest of the population. So the more I learned about all these things, the more I realized actually, if we want to create health equity, and we need to actually also talk about food and how we can change our food, our diet, our nutrition, to gain better health. So the idea was that, like, kind of, what I noticed is that, again, when it comes to all these different ethnic communities, all these countries, I think we need to be united, because the colonialism, what it did was like kind of divide and conquer, and it is still continuing. So we need actually to be all together in it if we want to create systemic change. And that's why for me, it was like kind of, I'm talking about to people of global majority. I don't like to say people of color because it focuses too much on the skin color. Mm-hmm. And I know that, there are a lot of people like myself who are light skinned. I mean, I actually had a message on Facebook from somebody saying, "You're white. Why do you refer to yourself as a person of color?" And, but people of global majority need to get their power back, to be empowered. And by calling them people of global majority, first of all, they realize they are actually not a minority. We might be a minority in a certain country, in the Western country, but as a culture, we are not. Yeah. So that's why I like that term quite a lot. And also, I think we need to be united. We need actually to decolonize like kind of our mindset, because the colonized mindset is again about certain cultures not accepting themselves and other cultures, other ethnic cultures, and always thinking that the West is better. I mean, I know people, it's really sad. I know people saying that one of my acquaintances, let's call her, like one of my British Asian acquaintances, she said once that, you know, she was a Muslim, practicing Muslim. She said that actually when she sees men from China and Japan, from that background, for her, she doesn't feel like she has to cover herself because she doesn't see them as men.
Oh,
and I think it is just, what she's really saying is that she doesn't see those people as human beings. And that is the colonized mindset. And it is just one example. It's also like kind of, you know, when we talk about food, especially as a nutritionist, that's what I'm interested in, is like kind of, you know, people think burger, that is food.
Yeah. It's interesting, the whole concept of identity. I just want to say that because like my Persian birth family consider themselves to be white, and I'll be perfectly honest, so I've always considered myself white because I grew up in, you know, in the UK, and you know, I didn't really have anything to do with the traditional background. But it's interesting, even my partner Tracy said to me, I don't see you as white, I see you as Middle Eastern. I was like, what? And I was like, but it's interesting, I said to my birth father, I said, do you consider yourself to be white? And he looked at me as if I'd, you know, said something like, are you an alien or something? He said, of course. And then he went on to explain how apparently, you know, Persia was the original Aryan, kind of like he went onto this whole kind of thing. So I guess it's interesting for me, you know, because you can see I'm even paler than you. But, you know, but also I guess it's that it's not just about the skin color. So, you know, I never call myself a person of color or a woman of color because, you know, I have white privilege, you know, I don't look up, you know what I mean? I feel like it would be co-opting it or jumping on a bandwagon in some way to do that. But, you know, there's obviously maybe some issues I have to do. You know, I think it's quite ingrained even in, you know, in various people. So I think that's really, really important. And I just want to give a little shout out because I know that plant-based, with as well as your food and diversity project, you're also, as part of the Plant-Based Health Professionals UK, part of the Divinity Coalition, Women's Coalition, which is running a brilliant campaign at the moment in the US to try and get the incoming administration to spearhead a transition to a plant-based economy to address, you know, both nutritional guidance through plant-based nutrition, but also address the shadow pandemics that you've touched on, such as food justice and racial and gender-based, you know, systemic inequality. So I think you're doing wonderful work. I'd like to wrap up now with our kind of rapid fire kind of questions. So these are kind of like fairly kind of short answers to these questions, which I ask everyone. Is that okay?
Yeah, go.
All right. So what's the most courageous thing you've done?
It is interesting. You would think there is just one act, but there wasn't just one act I did, and I thought, you know, it was courageous. I mean, if you ask people who know me, they might say, you know, when I left Austria to come to the UK, that was courageous. I mean, people told me later, oh my God, how could you do that? Because I really literally packed everything I had. I mean, you know, I took whatever I could with me on the plane, and the rest I told my family to send to me. And I had just a job for 6 months. I was living in a hospital accommodation in just one single room, but I was like, kind of, that's it. I'm done with Austria. I'm moving, you know, to the UK. And people later told me, oh my God, how could you do that? But again, you know, like quitting medicine, you know, when you're forced to do something, you feel like I don't have any other option because, you know, if I stay there, I'm going to go down. So I have to do it. So I don't know. I think those acts are actually not really, they don't really require a lot of courage because you're forced to do it. But every day when I post on social media, to be honest, some posts, I really need a lot of courage to do it. Like kind of, oh my God, that is gonna, especially when it comes to talking about racism. And I know it's like a taboo, you know, topic. People don't like to talk about it. And I see the reaction of people, you know, and so actually those little things, those everyday.
I love that those everyday ones, putting yourself out there, and standing for what you believe in. I love that. What does leadership mean to you, and what style of leader or kind of leader are you?
I never thought of myself as a leader, first of all.
Well, you are.
It's interesting because I have always been like this outsider. I'm so used to being alone, to doing things on my own without anybody else. So I never actually thought like I'm going to actually lead other people. But to be a good leader, obviously, first of all, you need to have a vision, a very big vision which you're passionate about. because you need to actually inspire people to feel the same passion so that they can actually commit to that vision and then inspire them to be the best version of themselves. Because I truly believe that we are all a lot more capable than what we do. And if somebody just gives us that push, takes us under their wing kind of, then a lot of people will be surprised how far and how high they can soar. So I think a good leader really needs to be that, to be able to do that. And so, yeah.
Nice. I like that. What do you love most about yourself?
I am stubborn. I know
you're stubborn. I like that.
Yeah, it might sound like kind of bad, but in a good way. I hope.
Yeah.
I hope.
Yeah,
well, let's say sometimes in a good way. My motto has always been, I don't know where I read that, like either I find a way or I make a way.
Nice.
So I mean, people tell me like kind of sometimes you see a wall, you just bang your head, hoping to open it, to create a door. And that has always been like kind of, my approach to certain things. Like when I moved to the UK, people said, although it was part of EU at the time, we weren't allowed to work as doctors more than a year. So I said, I'm going to find a way. Don't worry. I'll make it happen. So
yeah, you're determined. Nice.
Yeah, you could say determination, but sometimes it is more like a really
stubborn. Yeah, nice.
Nice. Like, I'm going to do it.
I like that. My star sign is Taurus with the bull, so that's kind of I'm meant to be stubborn. So I get it. I'm with you on that. And just very finally, Leila, what would be maybe one key lesson that you've learned in your life to date that you would like to share with other vegan women leaders?
I think a lot of times we think our story is unique to us. And one of the things I have learned is that my story, what I have experienced, is not unique at all. What I am doing is not unique at all. There are people who have experienced the same or similar, incidents, and they have gone through the same. And it is just a matter of actually being, having the courage to talk about it, being open and making ourselves vulnerable. Then we find the people who are like us. And I'm sometimes actually surprised when I met once a girl, and her story was very similar to mine and my sister's. Like she's from Iraq with her sister. They moved from Iraq to another European country, and they were doctors. And then they moved to England and had to give up medicine for some reasons. So it was very similar to my own and my sister's story. And I was actually surprised because, and I just think it is not just a one-off incident. There are a lot of people who go through the same experiences, and there's nothing unique about me, nothing special. Yeah. But, and I think it's actually a good thing, because it means that I'm not alone. Because a lot of times people who think there's something special about them, special about their experience, they feel lonely. And by realizing that actually no, that then it's just a matter of finding the right people.
Yeah, and you can only do that, as you say, by doing what you're doing and putting yourself out there and being true to who you really are, rather than kind of putting out a fake version or being someone that you're not really, just to get people to like you, kind of thing. So I love that. Wonderful. Leila, thank you so much for sharing. This has been such a wonderful conversation. I invite everyone to check out Leila's work. You can go to her website, Plant Powered Chi Nutrition, which is at drleiladh.com. And you can also find out about the plant-based health professionals at plantbasedhealthprofessionals.com. And of course, you can find out more about the Vegan Women's Leadership Network, veganwomensleadershipnetwork.com. Thank you so much for joining me, Leila. It's been a real pleasure. Thank you
for having me. I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in.